Test 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman being interviewed by a market researcher in a health club about her membership of the club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Oh, excuse me. I wonder if you'd have the time to take part in some market research.
What's it about?
About this club and your experiences and opinions about being a member. It'll take less than 5 minutes.
Oh, OK then, as long as it's quick.
Can I start by taking your name?
It's Selina Thompson.
Is that Thompson?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. And what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm an accountant, but I'm between jobs at the moment.
I understand. But that's the job I'll put down on the form. And would you mind my asking which age group you fall into? Below 30, 31 to 50, and above?
Over 50, I think we can safely say.
Great, thanks. And which type of membership do you have?
Sorry, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean how long?
No, is it a single-person membership?
Oh, right, no, it's a family membership.
Thanks. And how long have you been a member?
Ooh, let me see. I was certainly here 5 years ago, and it was probably 2 to 3 years more than that.
Shall I put down 8?
Oh, I remember now. It's 9, definitely. Sorry.
No problem. I've got that. And the last question in this first part is, what brought you to the club?
Sorry?
How did you find out about the club? Did you see any ads?
Well, I did actually, but I have to say I wasn't really attracted to the club because of that. It was through word of mouth.
So you were recommended by a friend?
Actually, my doctor. I'd been suffering from high blood pressure, and he said the club was very supportive of people with that condition, so I signed up.
Great, thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Now, for the second part of the form, I want to ask a bit more about your experience of the club.
Sure.
How often would you say you use the club?
It varies enormously, depending on how busy I am.
Of course. But on average, per month?
I'd say it averages out at twice a week.
OK, so 8 on average.
Yeah, and 4 of those are aqua aerobics classes.
That leads me to the next question. Would you say the swimming pool is the facility you make most use of?
Fair to say that, yep.
Right, thanks. And are there any facilities you don't use?
One area I realise I've never used is the tennis courts. And there's one simple reason for that.
You don't play tennis?
Actually, I'm not bad at it.
Oh.
It's that I'm not happy having to pay extra for that privilege.
Oh, right. I've made a note of that. Thanks. Now, in the last section, are there any suggestions or recommendations you have for improvements to the club?
Only about health and fitness?
Anything at all?
Well, I'd like to see more social events.
Oh.
It isn't just a question of getting together for games or classes, but other things, you know.
Yes, sure.
And another thing that I was thinking, when I had my yoga class in the gym last night, we were all sweltering in the heat, was that I think they should put in,
Air conditioning.
That's exactly what I mean. The rooms are really light and well designed, but they do need proper installations.
Sure. Well, I've made a note of that.
Good.
So, is there anything else you'd like to suggest? About quality of service, for example?
Oh, everyone's very nice here. They couldn't be more friendly and helpful. Oh, but I tell you what, it's a shame the restaurant isn't open in the evening on Saturday. And Sunday as well, for that matter.
Oh. So, the club should...
open it later on those days.
OK. Well, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Outdoor survival skills. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 16.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our outdoor survival program. As you know, this week you'll be learning some of the basic information and skills you need to look after yourself independently in the outdoors. These first 2 days will be based here in the classroom, and then we'll be taking a camping trip to put into practice some of the things you've learned. I'm going to start off with the topic of food. And to start with, I'll describe just 2 methods which we'll be putting into practice at our camp, and which make use of natural resources: the steam pit and the bamboo pot. I've got 2 posters here to make things clearer, and I'll start with the steam pit here. To make this, you'll need some dry sticks, some grass, some loose earth, and some stones. And for this week only, some matches. The first thing you do is to dig a shallow pit in the place you've chosen to do your cooking. Let's say about 25 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters wide. Your sticks have to be a bit wider than the pit because you have to put a line of them along the top from one end of the pit to the other. Before setting light to these, you take some large stones and arrange them on top. Then you start the fire and wait till the wooden platform burns through and the stones fall into the pit. At this point, brush away any pieces of hot ash from the stones. You can use a handful of grass and then take another stick and push it down into the center of the pit, between the stones. After that, you cover the whole pit with a thick layer of grass. And then you can put your food on it, wrapped in more pieces of grass, like parcels. Finally, Cover the whole thing with earth. You have to pat it firmly to seal the pit. Then all you have to do is take the stick out and pour a bit of water into the opening that it leaves. It should take about 4 hours for your food to cook, as it cooks slowly in the steam that's created inside the pit.
Now you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
So, simple but effective. The other method you're going to practice this week is the bamboo oven. Now, the steam pit is ideal in certain conditions because the heat is below ground level. For example, if there's a strong wind and you're afraid a fire might spread. But when it's safe to have an open fire, you can use the bamboo oven method. You get a length of bamboo, which, as you probably know, is hollow and consists of a number of individual sections with a wall in between. You use a sharp stick to make a hole in each of the dividing walls apart from the end one. Then you lean the bamboo over a fire with the top propped up by a forked stick and the bottom sitting on the ground. You pour enough water in the top to fill the bottom section and then light a fire underneath that section to heat the water. Then you put your food inside the top section and the steam coming up the bamboo through the holes you made cooks it. I'm going to move on now to food itself and talk about some of the wild plants you might cook. I'm going to begin with fungi. That's mushrooms and toadstools. I'm sure you'll be aware that some of these are edible and they're delicious, but some of them are highly poisonous. Now, whether they're poisonous or not, all fungi that you find in the wild should be cooked before eating, because that helps to destroy any compounds in them that might be mildly toxic. But be aware that any amount of cooking won't make poisonous varieties any safer to eat. Unless you can definitely identify a fungus, you should never eat it. It's not worth the risk. And you need to be really sure, because some fungi that are poisonous are very similar in appearance to certain edible varieties. They can easily be mistaken for each other. So, having said all that, fungi are delicious when they're freshly picked, and although they are only moderately nutritious, they do contain minerals which the body needs. I'll move on now to leafy plants, which are generally...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear two geography students talking. An older student, called Howard, is giving advice to a younger student, called Joanne, on writing her dissertation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Howard. I haven't seen you for a while.
Hi, Joanne. Yeah, they're keeping us really busy on the postgraduate programme. But how are you? You'll be starting your dissertation soon, won't you?
Yeah, tutorials start next week. I've got Dr. Peterson. You'll remember it all from last year, of course.
It's not something you forget easily. But seriously, although I didn't expect to enjoy writing my dissertation, and in fact I didn't really find it much fun, I wouldn't have missed the experience. I found it really improved my understanding of the whole degree programme, from the first year on.
Right.
So, what are you doing yours on?
Glaciated landscapes. Although I haven't decided exactly what aspect yet.
I did mine on climate systems, so I can't help you much, I'm afraid. But you'll be fine once you start your tutorials. Dr. Peterson will help you focus.
I know, and he'll set me deadlines for the different stages, which is what I need. My concern is that I've got tons of material on the topic, and I won't be able to stick to the word limit,
I remember I had different concerns when I was doing my dissertation.
Last year.
Yeah, before my first tutorial, I did a lot of fairly general reading because I hadn't fixed on my topic at that stage. I actually enjoyed that quite a lot and really improved my reading speed, so I was getting through a lot of material. I was frightened I wouldn't remember it all, though, so I got into the habit of making very detailed notes.
So, did you find your tutor helpful in getting you started?
Yeah, we certainly had some interesting discussions, but it's funny, I saw a brilliant programme about climate change, and it was that really fired me up. It was talking about some recent research which seemed to contradict some of the articles I'd been reading.
Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So you say your tutorials start next week?
Yeah.
Well, the first month's crucial. You've got to meet your tutor and decide on your focus, but don't become too dependent on him. Don't see him every week, only when you want to check something.
Right.
Once you've got the focus, you've got to get reading. It's helpful to look through the bibliographies for all the course modules relating to your topic, and get hold of any books you think you'll need.
I haven't got much money.
I mean, get the books from the library, far better.
And I suppose I should prepare a detailed outline of the chapters?
Yeah, absolutely. But don't feel you have to follow it slavishly. It's meant to be flexible.
Okay. Now, I'm someone who likes to get writing quickly. I can't just sit and read for a month.
Not like me, then. But if that's what suits you, your natural approach, then you really ought to start immediately and write the first chapter.
Right.
Now, Joanne, about the library, it's worthwhile getting on good terms with the staff. They aren't always helpful with undergraduates.
I suppose they focus on postgrads more.
Maybe. But show them you're serious about wanting to do good work.
And what if I can't find what I need?
Well, there's interlibrary loans.
Borrowing books from other libraries, but I've heard it isn't all that reliable.
You're right, but you probably won't need it anyway. Be positive. The library is likely to have most things you need. And during the dissertation writing period, you can take out 15 instead of the usual 10 books.
Should I look at previous year's dissertations?
You can do.
But I won't know which are the good ones.
The library only keeps the best, and the staff can advise you.
Are they willing to do that?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm worried about getting journal articles from the electronic library.
Well, have you tried to find any yet?
No.
Well, you should. It's really straightforward.
That's obviously something I'll have to look into.
Dr. Peterson will help.
Yeah, I know I can go to him if I have any worries.
Except he will be away in the second month. It's the holidays. You should ask him what to do while he's away.
Gosh, yeah. But I suppose I can get a lot of support from course mates. I know a couple of people who are thinking of doing the same topic as me.
Take care. Collaboration can become dependency. I think you'd better see how that works out, what the people are like.
You're probably right. About other reading, I suppose Dr. Peterson will recommend plenty of good articles to get me started.
One thing I'd find out is what his attitude is to internet sources.
Surely not in this day and age. I'd better get that sorted out right at the beginning.
I would if I were you.
And I've also got some questions about the research sections. How much time I should spend explaining the process?
Well, I think that's up to you. You can see how it develops as you're writing.
Okay.
It's the same with things like time management. That's something a tutor can't really help you with.
I agree.
So, is there anything else you need me to go over?
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a psychology undergraduate describing the research she is currently doing on expertise in creative writing. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
For my short presentation today, I'm going to summarise the work I've done so far on my research project to explore expertise in creative writing. Essentially, I'll share with you the process I underwent to gather my interim findings. First of all, I should give a little relevant background information about myself. Before I started my current degree course in cognitive psychology, I studied English literature. And, as you can imagine, this meant I spent a great deal of time thinking about the notion of creativity and what makes people develop into successful writers. However, the idea for this research project came from a very specific source. I became fascinated with the idea of what makes an expert creative writer when I read a well-known 20th century writer's autobiography. I won't say which one at this stage, because I think that might prejudice your interpretation. Anyway, this got me thinking about the different routes to expertise. Specifically, I wondered why some people become experts at things whilst others fail to do so, in spite of the fact that they may be equally gifted and work equally hard. I started to read about how other researchers had explored similar questions in other fields. I began to see a pattern that those studies which involved research in a lab were too controlled for my purposes, and I decided to avoid reading them. I was quite surprised to find that the clearest guidance for my topic came from investigations into what I call practical skills, such as hairdressing or waiting tables. Most of these studies tended to use a similar set of procedures, which I eventually adopted for my own project. I'll now explain what these procedures were. I decided to compare what inexperienced writers do with what experienced writers do. In order to investigate this, I looked for 4 people whom I regarded as real novices in this field. which proved easy, perhaps unsurprisingly. It proved much harder to locate people with suitably extensive experience who were willing to take part in my study. I asked the first 4 to do a set writing task and, as they wrote, to talk into a tape recorder, a technique known as think aloud. This was in order to get experimental data. Whilst they were doing this, a research assistant recorded them using video. I thought it might be helpful for me in my transcriptions later on. I then asked 4 experienced writers to do exactly the same task. After this, I made a comparison between the 2 sets of data, and this helped me to produce a framework for analysis. In particular, I identified 5 major stages which all creative writers seem to go through when generating this genre of text. I think it was fairly effective, but still needs some work, so I intend to tighten this up later for use with subsequent datasets. I then wanted to see whether experienced writers were actually producing the better pieces of writing. So I asked an editor, an expert in reviewing creative writing, to decide which were the best pieces of writing. This person put the 8 pieces of work in order of quality, in rank order, and using his evaluations, I was then able to work out which sequence of the 5 stages seemed to lead to the best quality writing. Now, my findings are by no means conclusive at this point. I still have a long way to go, but if any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them and go.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.